as we go along, or so this one, this is custom text to reduce confusion. So in some cases, you're running a report, and some cases OLM is going to return, or the OLM analytics is going to return back values that may not make sense. I mean, you may have a sense of that when you're building a report, but if you're trying to send the report to other people, other staff in your library, some of it's not going to make sense. Like, why are you seeing these -1s in the barcodes where the barcode sort of at the bottom actually has an actual barcode in it? What does that -1 mean? And you're going to see this across other, not just barcodes. You may see this with like the MMS IDs. You may see this with other sort of control numbers. In this case, like the -1 barcode typically means it's like a withdrawn item, or it could be some other odd status or something along those lines. That's going to depend on what type of report you're running. So there's ways to change that within. Like, you could sort of bake that into the report itself. I mean, you could go into Excel, do a find and replace, and do it that way. But I found it like pretty helpful if you can build it into the report. So in this case, I was able to switch the -1s to item withdrawn. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail here because I think we're going to actually cover this part later on. I think it might be Kim, perhaps, that will be touching a little bit on formula. So I don't want to go in too much and kind of overlap a later session. But this just gives you an example of when you're running the report. If you, in this case, when you're going into you can pick the column you want, in this case the barcode column, go into the formula tab, and in this case I kind of showed like, I kind of did like the bottom screen there is the text I used to replace, what essentially is doing is replacing all of the -1s that show up within that column in your report with the text item withdrawn. And what that'll do is just kind of be a little bit more helpful in terms of like for working with other colleagues and so forth. It just kind of solves some of the issues of people not understanding why you're seeing these odd values and so forth. So, and you can you can get pretty extensive with this as well in terms of item replacements, things like that. But again, like we're going to be getting a little bit more into formulas at a later section during this morning. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about how I constructed the replace, the formula that you're seeing there. But I just want to give you an example of what is possible that you can sort of build into the report itself. Now, this is another one that I find may be worth changing in some cases. So in some cases, like you're gonna build a report. Someone may run it. It may be working fine when you run at that time, but then your inventory may change. Like you may have a report that looks for something like items recently moved or withdrawn or something, and it may work and you give you results. But something goes to run that at a later state, like several months down the road. They may get this, like what you're seeing here is a no results kind of error message, and it's sometimes like for someone who's not like very familiar with analytics or is running the report that hasn't built the report or something like that, they may not understand exactly what's going on, because it may be sort of like very cryptic text. They may even be sort of like weird system error messages built into it, or almost like SQL or SQL statements or something like that display with the error messages. So I find that can be a little bit confusing for people. There are ways to get a little bit more context here. So in this case, what you can do is when you're in the criteria tab, if you hit the XYZ button at the top there, that'll give you you'll see this analysis properties window, and what it'll be is you want to look at the results display, And there's an option for no results setting. So with that report that was giving an error message, what happened there was no results. It was returning nothing at that point. So it gave that sort of bizarre error message. So if you hit the XYZ button, you get to the analysis properties, and then you see this whole window here of, and you change the drop-down menu to display custom message. And so here I chose a header of just no items listed. You can be much more extensive there. You can be very clear as to like why they're not getting results or so forth. And then there's a message here, like I put like no current items in acquisitions technical services, have an active patron request at this moment. And then I also included like if you have any questions, please contact Todd Felkowski at my email address. So that's something that might be helpful, like so if you have someone else running it, they get that error message, they may be able to just send you an email and say, hey, how come I'm seeing this? Why is this happening? So so what you're seeing is like that the red no results is essentially the header, and then everything else under that is the message body. And so what happens is, so what I did is after changing that custom error message, now you're seeing this here. Again, like I probably could have been a little more clearer than when I was here, but you could do something along those lines. You can be as detailed as you want, so like why you're not getting results, just saying like, you know, at this time there was no valid responses or something, and people, you know, it should be a little bit more clarity, at least in terms of like, you know, like what people are seeing when they get no results. And so I found it helpful to put like, you know, an email in or some kind of like contact or a phone number or something. That way people have a point of recourse when they're getting these odd messages. All right, any questions at this point, or? So moving on, I hope I'm not moving too fast through all this, but the next piece I wanted to touch on is the title. So when you're building reports, sort of the default title, I believe sort of inherits whatever the save name was. So and it just basically gives you that little like fines and fees aging in this case. So there's not much there. You may want to give again more context and more clarity for the users that are working with the reports. And also in some cases too, like if you have a report that someone's running daily or weekly or something like that, like if you're looking at like lost items or unpaid loans or something like that for fulfillment or the CERT desk, and someone's running that repeatedly, and make it confusing because there's like, again, there's no really, not necessarily a timestamp built into anything. And if someone's running the report and saving into a folder and having a whole series of them, it may get confusing at some point. So I find that if you adjust the title, you can solve some of those issues. So again, on this is in the results tab, and you have like, again, you have essentially in the results tab, you have essentially the two containers that are shown, and I've kind of cut out the table part. So you have the first container is the title. Below that is the table container, and the table one is typically, that's your table of results of all the data elements. So in this case, you want to modify the title container here. So you want to hit the little pencil, which is like the edit icon in the title container there. That'll bring up that separate window, which you're kind of seeing a screenshot of below it. And you're going to switch over to the results tab here. And you'll see kind of, there's a number of options here. Where you can do a title, where you can do, so you can enter in a custom title here, again, so you can be as extensive as you want and be very clear about what the report is, what it's doing, what it's running. You can also, the check mark here for display save name, what that'll do is if you leave that checked, your custom title will show. You leave that checked, the save title, so the file name of that report will display under that. So you can uncheck that if you want to just get rid of that, or if you want to leave the file name and the save title, you can leave that checked and you'll just see kind of essentially two titles next to each other. You have the option to upload a logo or an image as well below that. There's a subtitle field, a start time, which is essentially that's your timestamp, and then a help URL. So what I did in this case, I actually filled all of these out. And what you're getting here is what you're seeing is the sort of finished, the top image there is the finished title image or title container. After all the customizations I added in, so I put in like Trinity logo there. I forget if I customized the title at all. I added a subtitle here just to kind of give a little bit more information, like so unpaid loans between 91 and 180 days are listed as really old. So it just kind of gives a little more context. You're going to see like really old in the data rather than other pieces. The time run. So I actually did activate the time run stamp, the timestamp there, which again will be helpful if you're running a bunch of the reports on a regular basis. It'll be helpful to have the timestamps built into the reports. That way you can kind of go back and just kind of look at if you're saving these or exporting to Excel or something like that. It'll give you a little help, a little more context for your report. And then it's the icon. This is not that great, but so if I go back, there's at the bottom here of the options is the help URL. So I actually added a URL in there. So in this case, what it does is it shows up as a question mark on the right-hand side. So this is not great because it's kind of easy to miss or not know that something is custom. It may just look like it's sort of like a default built-in help thing for Home Analytics, but it may be helpful. Like in some cases, what I have is I added a URL to this question mark, and what that could do is you could link out to like one of your web pages on your website or something like that has like information about that report or contact information for anyone who's having trouble with it or something like that. So it's something you can add. Again, it's not great the way it displays, I think, but it's an option that's there.